This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agner.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. My name is Jay Agner. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Mark Allen. He is the co-founder and CTO of Cobalt, a pretty cool platform that is growing in popularity. So we met through, mutual connections and his, a bunch of businesses he's worked with. So, Mark, thanks for being on, buddy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So where did you grow up? I know we're not too far away from each other now, I think, but where'd you grow up and did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur later?
Sure. So in a way, it kind of did. So I grew up in Bluebell, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, about half hour, 40 minutes outside. And then in 2015, I moved to Conshohocken, PA, which is another Philly suburb, a little bit closer to the city. And I mentioned Conshohocken because that is where I met my wife, and she owns a couple of businesses in Conshohocken. And I didn't really have much of an entrepreneurial streak until I met her. So she really kind of taught me to start thinking in terms of like, hey, you could have your own business and stuff like that. And we had an opportunity to do that in software here, me and my partner, Mark Spence. So we took it and ran with it in 2021. So here we are.
And what is Cobalt for those who do not know?
Yeah. So Cobalt it's a mental health software as a service platform. And the idea is that like a healthcare institution can take it and use it to service its own employees who may be struggling with mental health issues. And the reason this came about, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, was COVID was a very stressful time for healthcare providers. So they're out there, working 90-hour weeks, and they were trying to, help patients, but they themselves were experiencing like burnout, depression, like high levels of stress and anxiety.
Right.
So Penn wanted to figure out like how do we help our own people, and that was conceptually what Cobalt does. It makes it very easy to book like one-on-one appointments with healthcare providers in your own system. You can get access to things like group sessions that are hosted by people in the system, self-guided resources. You can take clinical assessments to learn more about what's going on with you and figure out like the right level of care for you. So that's kind of the product in a nutshell.
And where did the name Cobalt come from?
From way back at the beginning of the project, we're trying to exude this feeling of, I don't know, like calmness, like sereneness. You can see other players in the space, like there's one called Calm, for example. They all try to have these visuals that make you feel relaxed. And the idea of like, like the cobalt shade of blue is a very relaxing shade of blue. Came up with like a neat little logo for it, and that's kind of what stuck. So Cobalt is kind of like the Penn version of Cobalt is that same relaxing blue. Other institutions have white labeled it with different colors, so the name makes a little less sense, but that's the idea.
Like you said, if it was born during COVID, very common problem, I guess, or situation that mental health becomes and it's nice that it's just become more and more kind of mainstream, I guess, like taking care of people and their mental health. How competitive is the space, and did that competition also kind of continue to grow as COVID and we came out of it, and like we're now in the post-COVID world, whatever that means. Is there a lot of competition in the space?
There's there's a lot of like I would say like adjacent competition. Like we're solving a much more, I guess, like directed problem where it's like you're a system and you're bringing your own providers and your own resources to help your own employees. A lot of who I guess we'd consider as competitors, it's more like the better helps of the world where it's not your own people. It's just like you get out your phone and you're just texting with some random therapist that you've never met across the country.
Right.
So they have, I would say, like an easier path to scale because it's like, just plug in any person, doesn't matter who it is. But this is more of a, we maybe don't scale as well, but I feel like we provide a more effective, treatment mechanism. Like someone who's working nearby you, it's not someone you know necessarily. It's someone who works in the same kind of environment is going to be able to empathize with you better, like understand the things that you're going through, as opposed to someone 3,000 miles away who doesn't know you at all.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, you're a software guy. You're the CTO. What was your journey from growing up in Bluebell and kind of just the outskirts of Philadelphia? How did you get into tech, and what was your kind of cliff note version of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I was actually really fortunate, even though I went to public school. I had some really great teachers that were very, I would say, like tech forward. When I was in third grade, this is probably like 1990 or something like that. I remember there was one in particular that she had, you know, in her classroom, there was a computer that had a modem and she could connect to online services like Prodigy. Like, so remember, like the web wasn't even a thing yet until I want to say like
Right.
91 or 92. But she had this and she encouraged the students to work with it. And I think my fifth grade teacher was kind of similar, where she had computers in her room. So really fortunate there to have like encouraging public school teachers that really got me like turned on. It was like, whoa, this is so cool. It's like this whole other world. And it mapped very well to, I think, how my mind works. It's all I've ever really wanted to do with myself is do software. It's the one thing that really makes sense to me. Like my wife will tell you, I'm like all thumbs dealing with anything mechanical. Like, you give her like a machine that's broken and she could just like walk up to it and fix it without thinking about it. And I can't. But software is just always something that made sense to me, and that's what I'm really passionate about, what I enjoy doing. So I went to school for computer science at RIT
Hmm.
in Rochester, New York, and I was hired out of school at. I did a couple internships at Merck. They're like up in like Lansdale, PA
Hmm. Yeah.
area. So I did a couple internships there. They offered me a job out of school, and I was there writing software for them like from day one. Once I was out of school, I was there for a year and a half, and I kind of got poached by my current employer, Transmogrify, which was it was two guys, Mark Spence and Ed Watkeys. They were working as consultants at Merck, and our paths had crossed once or twice. And they approached me like, "Hey, we're starting a consulting agency. Do you want to come along for the ride?" So I was like, "Yeah, okay." Like whatever, 20, 23, 24. Like, let's do it. It sounds fun. It's risky, but you know, it sounds like a good opportunity. And I've been there ever since. I mean, it's been over 17 years because the work never gets old of, being a tech consultant, but it really
Right.
prepared me well, I think, for what I ended up doing with Cobalt.
That's awesome. Um, the part where your wife owned a couple of businesses and kind of convinced you or enlightened you or however you want to say it of consulting and doing your own thing is maybe the way forward. Tell me a little more about that. Like, was it kind of just a natural progression of conversations and you're seeing what she's doing, or like how did like kind of her entrepreneurial thing not rub off, but how did you kind of grow from that into being your own entrepreneur? It's an interesting, like, kind of, fast forward along until you kind of hit, your 30s or whatever it was. And you're like, oh, now I have the experience. She's doing it. I guess I could do it. Like, tell me a little bit more about like that actual story.
Sure. So her path was interesting. Like, so her parents are both doctors. She originally was going to med school. And then, she was doing things to prepare. Like, she was like, oh, volunteering as an EMT. And she's like, I can't, like, be around, like surgeries and blood and things like that. I don't want to do, being a medical doctor is not for me. So she got a degree in business and then went on to run pretty big retail stores as a career. And then maybe, I guess it's over 11 years ago at this point, she walked away from, doing really well for herself, but it wasn't what she really loved to do.
Hmm.
So she's like, you know what, I'm just going to walk away from like six-figure job, and I'm going to figure out how to run a coffee business. It's something that's really I've always been passionate about. And she grew up in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, so coffee's always been a big part of her life. And so she just sort of she's like, hey, why not me? She's like a terrific like problem solver. It's like MacGyver. And so she started that business. She's expanded to do all sorts of things. She roasts her own coffee now. She has her own like kitchen, other locations. She just opened a year and a half ago, like Brazilian bakery also in Conshohocken, and but anyway, like just even before the Brazilian bakery, she gave me the entrepreneurial bug because it's a good picture of like why not me? Like for her, it's like, why not? I could just go and do this. And I never really thought in those terms. I was always like, okay, both my parents and my brother, they just have like white collar jobs. They live in a really nice house and everything, but they don't in my head, I guess I never really thought about it. It sounds stupid now that I'm older, but it's like I was just like, oh, that's how it works. It's just like, you have the one house, and you have the white collar job and you do that until it's time to retire.
Right.
And then I'm just like, wow, I could, why not me? Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at this stuff. Like, I could go out and give it a shot and do my own thing. And I really like to do that. I mean, it's a lot of work and a lot of stress because I see with her, like you have to deal with so much stuff
Right.
as a business owner. But it was just like, she was a great example there because it was just like I could see the ins and outs of everything, like dealing with the lawyers, accountants, all the moving parts of running a business. I'm like, hey, if she can do this, I can use her as a sounding board for stuff. It's like she didn't have the same support that I do now. Like she had to figure everything out on her own. She had a
Right.
much harder path. So yeah, just watching her, I was like, wow, that's really, that's inspirational, I suppose. Maybe think about things in a different way.
And how does that relationship work today? Like, is it it's funny because it's almost the opposite. My wife is working on a business with one of her friends, and she comes to me, and it's an interesting dynamic where you have to like be husband, but like not be business guy, and then like be business guy and not, and you have to say things like you normally wouldn't like probably say because So how does that dynamic work with you guys? Is there like stuff that's just off limits? Do you just ask whatever and she gives you advice for whatever, or is it all like unsolicited? What's the actual relationship?
No, I mean it works pretty well because she's I say, very blunt and very direct. So there's no, like tiptoeing around things. It's like things aren't really off limits, which is nice. It's kind of refreshing. So we have pretty direct conversations. The biggest thing that's tricky is that our worlds are so different, and but at the same time, it's like she can still, she can give good advice to me, and like vice versa. I hope I'm giving good advice to her when she asks
Right.
about things for a sounding board. So we can't get into like the technical nitty gritty of each other's businesses, but we can talk more like high level about things. Or if we, we're gonna be like, oh, this lawyer was great to work with. You guys should check them out, like that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's nice
Right.
to, you know.
No, that is it sounds like a good balance. And speaking of balance, how have you balanced, keeping your 9 to 5 and being such a big, important part of obviously of Transmogrify? You've been there for like 17 years, I think you said. That's a long time. Have they given you kind of the freedom to do it? Has you just been like after hours? Like, what's the actual like? Here's how I went out and built this business while I'm working a 9 to 5.
So it's the reason it can work is because Mark Spence, who owns Transmogrify, he's my partner in Cobalt. So the idea is that Transmogrify does consulting work, and that can sort of, we do some Cobalt consulting work through Transmogrify. So it's like I can kind of pay my own way doing the day job, and then we're trying to grow the portion of the pie that is the Cobalt work to take over all of the Transmogrify. Like there are a couple big clients for Transmogrify that I think would never go away. Like that's gonna stay around for hopefully another 17 years. But yeah, we can. That's really the only reason we could get away. If there's too much to do for it to be like a nights and weekends thing, and just because Mark is running the show at Transmogrify and is a partner in Cobalt, like he has a vested interest in seeing Cobalt succeed as well. So we get lucky in that respect.
No, it sounds like it sounds like a good recipe for success. So, was Penn the first customer for you guys? Who was the first customer for Cobalt? How did you get them? Just in how, like, I'm curious. Like, did you build a platform first? Did you have the problem first? Like, what was the order of operations?
So, and I don't know how helpful this advice is going to be for your listeners, but the reason we got the work at Penn was at the beginning of the pandemic. This was it must have been February of 2020, late February or early March, like the first week of March or something like that. We got a call from a friend of ours, Roy Rosen. He's the chief innovation officer at Penn Medicine. We've worked with him forever. He used to run, Quicken at Intuit. Like he's like an old school, like Silicon Valley,
Right.
startup guy, but now he works at Penn Medicine. We've been doing work at Penn Medicine, like various projects for them for 7-8 years. So pandemic starts. I remember because we were at my wife's house at the time. We were like laying down new floor in her kitchen. We get this phone call. I was like, oh, I better take this. And so it was Roy, and he was like, hey, we have the green light now. Like funds have been released to build a system that does this, and he described Cobalt. we need it like yesterday. But realistically, can you guys do this in 2 weeks? Like build the whole thing. So just talking to Mark Spence and Joe Fritz, other person, that it was like a Sunday afternoon or something that we got this. And just thinking, I was like, oh geez, like we're to do this in 2 weeks, it's going to be like 78 hours weeks. We're going to have to clear the decks and figure this out. So, and I was just like, let's do it. You just don't think about like, we really trust Roy, and Roy's coming here asking us to do this. So let's do it and not look back. So in that way, Penn was our first customer. And it really was having established relationships, like, and doing that. I mean, like, it requires a lot to establish relationships. It's, you have to, hit it off with the people that you work with, but you also
Right.
like, you need to make sure you can deliver. Like Roy really trusted us because we had like a track record. We've worked with him before, and we always deliver on
Mhm.
things for him. So that the trick is getting your foot in the door. And luckily we had the foot in the door through him. So he brought us on. He was like, okay, good. Let's have these guys do it. And the rest is history.
And how is that change as far as I mean, you're not gonna get a call every Sunday for somebody to be your next big client, but how is that client acquisition process matured as you guys have gotten, your feet under you?
So that's one of the things that we are figuring out. We've engaged, like we're like putting feelers out with some marketing firms to help us with this, or some sales firms, because it's a very like highly specialized, very specific space. It's not like, oh, we like slap up a website and then people find us organically. It's more like it is very much like a relationships business. And because it is like academia, or most of the medical centers are like related with like an academic institution, that's very like weirdly incestuous. So the way that we've grown outside of Penn is by people we've worked with at Penn actually leaving Penn to go to another institution, or it's like people at other institutions like talking with their colleagues at Penn, and they like hear about us.
Mhm.
So we get super lucky in that, like, hey, we're doing something right, and people are like stumbling on us, which is great. But if we had a better strategy, which is something, and so like our New Year's resolution for 2024 is figure out a better way to like, okay, let's get some like real actual salespeople who know what they're doing in here, put ourselves out there. Because if we're doing this well, just like kind of like almost like word of mouth, I think there's a lot of upside there to have someone help. But it's tricky because the sales cycles are so long.
Mm.
There's, it's not like, oh, go to the website and click a few times and sign up. Like it doesn't work. Like HR department is not going to go through that process to roll some product out to their employees. There's a lot of like legal stuff that has to happen. You know, a million little things that need to happen. So that's another thing we're going to look at optimizing, is how to shorten the sales cycle.
Would you have done anything differently if you had to start over tomorrow with this platform that you guys did?
That's a good question. I would say I feel like we got a lot of considering how quickly we built it initially, we got a ton of the details right. And like, for example, the product is built to be like, not specific to Penn. It's like institution agnostic. And we did that from like day one. We built it
Mhm.
thinking like, hey, this might grow out of Penn, even though we only have a very short time to build it. Like, let's do it in we call it like a generic way. And that has really paid off for us. That's just like one example of things that like, oh, in hindsight, it's like, I can't believe we did that. That was a great idea. But it worked out. The thing that we did not do that I would like to have redone is having really good analytics from day one.
Mhm.
So it's like now we have a much better solution in place to, it's like information in the aggregate, like what are people, what parts of the site are people using,
Right.
like how to do, data analysis, all that kind of stuff. When we launched, it was like, let's just like slap Google Analytics up there and call it a day, and like we have to focus on other things. I really would have liked in hindsight. It's like, because once the time passes, you can't go back into history and be like, oh, like let's track all this stuff. It's like
Right.
we missed the
Right.
opportunity. So that's the big thing for me, that the missing analytics from the earlier, like the first like year or two of this is, I mean, analytics are there, just not to the level that we would like them. That's something that I would like to redo if we could.
Who is your ideal customer?
I think it's health systems that take the product seriously. And I think just Dartmouth Health is
I saw
one that
that.
I
Yeah, I saw that. Very cool.
yeah, just using it as an example here. They hired people to, to be like full time, like working, on the platform, like psychotherapists, social workers, a psychiatrist as well, and they have dedicated people that are set up to work on Cobalt, which is like a huge investment on their part. It's a bit of a risk, like,
Right.
from our part, it's like awesome. Like we're really jazzed. Like you guys are taking this so seriously. Like they think about stuff. They'll like pitch things to us, and they're really like they're always really well thought out. It's like, hey, like we would like to, do X, Y, Z. Is that something you guys support? Sometimes it's like, yes, we do that. Other times it's like, no, we don't do that, but that's a really great idea.
Hmm.
So, and so then we work on, collaboratively with them. It's like we'll design how it's going to look, our designer, and walk through with them. They give feedback, and it's like, okay, cool, we're going to build this out. So just like having an institution that's excited about the product and like excited about helping people. It's not just like, it could be something and just making this up, but like, there could be an institution. It's like, oh, we just want to check off this HR checkbox. Like, yeah,
Right.
we're helping our employees. We just threw some money at these people. We don't really care. Dartmouth in particular is just like, wow, they really are making an investment, and they care about it. It's really exciting.
That is cool. And I can imagine like the stickiness of a product like that. I mean, just exponentially increases if people are hiring people to, you know, specifically to work through your platform. That's a pretty cool model. All right, last question, non-business related. If you could do anything on earth and you knew you couldn't fail, what would it be?
Do anything on earth, and I knew I couldn't fail. I think I would like to spend the rest of my life traveling and living in different parts of the world. We say like get an Airbnb for a month, and like Barcelona or whatever.
Right.
Just hang there, eat all the food, drink all the drinks, experience what life is like there. And then it's like, okay, so next month, like let's go to like New Delhi, India or whatever, and check that out. Just like
I love that.
see the world. And then I don't know, like have it's almost like a food or travel blog or something like that. I would love to, have something to document all the things like, oh, we went to this really cool pastry shop, and here are the pictures of the things that we ate. If I could just do that and succeed at it, and that paid the bills, that would be for me. That would be a ton of fun. My wife would
I
enjoy
love
that as well.
I do love that very much. It's kind of an Anthony Bourdain kind of lifestyle. I think that's where it's at. All right, well you're awesome, man. I love the story. If people want to find you and reach out directly or they want to find out more about Cobalt, how do they do that?
So we have a website. It's cobaltinnovations.org. COBALT is how it's spelled. Yeah, and it has a contact email on there, and you can learn about the product on the site as well.
Perfect, man. All right, well enjoy your holiday season, brother. It was great talking to you and I'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Okay, thanks. You too, Jay. Take care.
Thanks, Mark. See you, buddy.